Good morning, you're watching A News. I'm Dilek Tuna. Here are the top stories. Trump criticises Zelenskyy as Ukraine refuses to recognise Russian control of Crimea. The Ukrainian capital Kyiv suffers from a major attack, leaving dozens injured. US Defence Secretary Pete Hegseth says that the era of America as the sole guarantor of European security has ended. President Trump is ramping up pressure on Ukraine, criticising Zelenskyy for rejecting key parts of a US-backed peace deal. Our Washington correspondent, Ube Shabandar, has more.
President Trump launched another barrage of criticism on Wednesday against Ukrainian leader Vladimir Zelenskyy, accusing him of not being sufficiently serious regarding reaching a resolution to the ongoing war with Russia. Washington has presented Ukraine with what is being described as the final offer for peace, an offer that will include American recognition of Crimea as Russian territory and no possibility of NATO membership for Ukraine, both of which Zelenskyy has publicly rejected. President Trump said that he believes that Zelenskyy's rejection of key components of his peace deal is a major obstacle. The White House was furious at Zelenskyy's statement this week that rejected the recognition of Russian control over the occupied Crimean Peninsula. In a social media post, President Trump said that he is not requiring Zelenskyy to recognize Crimea as belonging to the Russian Federation. However, Trump slammed Zelenskyy's public statements on Crimea, saying that Zelenskyy can, quote, have peace, or he can fight for another 3 years before losing the whole country. President Trump has indicated that he does not believe Zelenskyy's position on Crimea is realistic, and that Kyiv doesn't have the military leverage to make additional demands. Vice President J.D. Vance said earlier on Wednesday that the U.S. proposal would freeze the conflict along the current front lines, and he called on both parties to either say yes or risk the U.S. to step away from the negotiations. Washington is piling on the pressure with the hopes that Zelenskyy will agree to the American peace framework. Trump warned Zelenskyy that his recent statements would do nothing but, in the words of the American president, prolong the killing fields. The Trump administration's peace framework includes a land for peace deal that would recognize Russia's annexation of Crimea and work towards lifting European Union sanctions on Russia and normalize relations between Moscow and Washington. I'm Ube Shabandar for A News in Washington, D.C.
Previously, our Leila Masimova discussed the London peace talks on the Russia-Ukraine war with Yaroslav Yurchishin, an MP from the Holos Party from Kyiv, Ukraine. He explained why the US proposal to recognize Crimea as part of Russian territory will not be accepted by Ukraine, noting that the recent US proposal contradicts statements made by Trump during his first term.
Yes, we do expect that all democratic countries will be stay in position that unlawful forcibly occupied territory can be recognized as a part of as a part of Russia. So we're talking not only about Crimea, but about for our regions which Russia includes on a constitutional level into itself without any international law position about that, denying any agreement, denying any law system what was established after the Second World War. Due to clues, I couldn't say that facts because openly US anytime announced that they can recognize Crimea as a part of Russian territory. I must remember to our colleagues from US that in 2018, in first term of Trump, US declared that never ever recognized Crimea as a part of Russian territory.
A large-scale Russian missile and drone attack struck Kyiv in the early hours of Thursday morning, killing 9 and injuring at least 63 people, according to Ukrainian authorities. The assault, which began around 1 a.m, targeted multiple residential areas across the capital, leaving a trail of destruction and chaos. Ukraine's State Emergency Service reported that at least 42 people were hospitalized, including 6 children. Rescue operations continued throughout the early morning as emergency workers searched for survivors and victims beneath the rubble. The Kyiv City Military Administration announced on Telegram that the city had been hit by a combination of drones and ballistic missiles. Fires erupted in several neighbourhoods following the strikes. The United States may no longer serve as Europe's main security shield. Defence Secretary Pete Hegseth says it's time for NATO allies to boost their own defence efforts. Speaking in Pennsylvania, Hegseth said the era of America as the sole guarantor of European security has ended. He called on NATO countries to raise military spending to 5% of GDP, saying the current 2% is no longer enough. That threshold was set back in 2014 after the Crimea crisis. Reports also suggest the Pentagon is weighing a troop reduction in Eastern Europe, while US officials signal no clear path for Ukraine joining NATO and a push for Europe to take more responsibility in the future. Tensions remain high in the global trade arena as US President Donald Trump signals that any easing of steep tariffs on China will be conditional and entirely dependent on Beijing's actions. These comments come amid ongoing negotiations that have rattled markets and raised global economic concerns.
US President Donald Trump signaled a potential shift in his trade war with China, stating that tariffs on Chinese goods will come down substantially, but not to zero. He emphasized that any reduction depends on China's response.
Well, that depends on them. We have a situation where we have a very, very great place. It's called the United States of America, and it's been ripped off for years and years. These people know it. We talked about it before you came in. We've been ripped off by every country in the world, practically, and friend and foe. And we're not doing that anymore.
In response to President Trump's tariff announcement...
This follows comments from U.S. Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent, who said that the ongoing tariff standoff with China is unsustainable and that a de-escalation is likely between the world's 2 largest economies. Trump also confirmed that the current 145% tariff on Chinese imports remains unchanged for now, although he suggested that a substantial cut might be on the table.
No, I haven't brought it down. I haven't brought it still 145. I haven't brought it down. I said it's a high tariff. It is a high tariff, but I haven't brought it down. It basically means China's not doing any business with us, essentially, because it's a very high number. But we get along. I get along very well with President Xi, and I hope we can make a deal. Otherwise, we'll set a price, and hopefully they'll come here and they'll contribute. And if they don't, that's okay.
Beijing has strongly criticized the U.S. and responded by imposing retaliatory tariffs of 125% on American goods. Chinese officials argue that U.S. levies defy basic economic logic and international trade principles. Trump has also imposed a blanket 10% tariff on all other U.S. imports and introduced higher duties on steel, aluminum, and autos. Tax hikes targeting dozens of other countries have been suspended until July, and new levies are being considered for specific industries such as pharmaceuticals and semiconductors. Meanwhile, the wide-ranging measures have shaken financial markets and raised fears of a looming recession. Experts warn that prolonged tariffs and retaliatory measures could destabilize international supply chains, drive up consumer prices, and weigh heavily on global growth.
South Korea's acting President Han Duck-seo says the government will seek a win-win outcome as trade talks with the United States begin today. The focus is on cooperation, but also on easing steep tariffs. A South Korean delegation is meeting US officials for the first round of trade talks. Cooperation in shipbuilding and energy is expected to be high on the agenda, along with shared defence costs. South Korea is currently facing 25% US tariffs and is looking for relief. At the National Assembly, Acting President Han Duck-soo also called for swift approval of an $8.6 billion supplementary budget aimed at boosting economic recovery amid global uncertainty. The South Sudanese Army, known as the South Sudan People's Defence Forces, has announced that it has now taken full control of Nasir town in the north of the country. Government soldiers were pushed out of the town last month by armed militia affiliated with South Sudan's opposition leader and Vice President Riek Machar. The fighting last month led to the arrest of Mr. Machar in Juba. Patrick Oyet reports from South Sudan's capital, Juba.
South Sudan's government says clashes in Nasir have now ended. However, opposition leader and Vice President Riek Machar remains under house arrest. President Kiir's party says it plans to take Mr. Machar to court for mobilizing armed militia to attack and overrun a government military garrison in Nasir. The armed civilians known as the White Army fought for Mr. Machar in a civil war in the country between 2013 and 2018, but Mr. Machar's group says it now has no link with that militia. Riek Machar does head the largest opposition group in South Sudan, which has an armed wing. Mr. Machar only returned to the country in 2018 as a result of a peace arrangement. The arrest of Mr. Machar is creating concern among many South Sudanese people, as well as section of the international community. Germany has temporarily closed its embassy in South Sudan. US has removed all its non-essential staff, but South Sudan's government insists that the country will not go back to war. Patrick Oyet for Air News in Juba, South Sudan.
Mourners from around the world are gathering in Vatican City as Pope Francis lies in state at St. Peter's Basilica. His funeral is set for Saturday, with world leaders and over 100 international delegates expected to attend.
St. Peter's Basilica opened its doors on Wednesday to welcome thousands of mourners paying their final respects to Pope Francis, who passed away 2 days ago at the age of 88. The late pontiff's funeral is scheduled for Saturday, April 26th, with his lying in state continuing through Friday evening. The day began with a solemn procession from his Vatican residence to the Basilica, accompanied by cardinals and witnessed by crowds lining the route, some applauding in tribute, others shedding quiet tears. According to Italy's Civil Protection Agency, up to 250,000 people are expected to attend the outdoor funeral service in St. Peter's Square. Tens of thousands have already arrived in Vatican City in recent days to honour his legacy.
For this moment, I arrived on Monday for 1 week, and now I had the chance to go there and see the Pope. He was dead, but I saw him and I could say goodbye.
There's kind of just a mixture of emotions. I mean, I'm anxious a lot walking in. It's such a surreal place, and it's very holy, and seeing the body and just remembering everything that he stood for is very important.
Truly, I felt in my heart as if I was about to lose someone very close to me, but it is a moment to stay in prayer for him, for his rest, to give thanks for everything he has done for the Church. This is the feeling of gratitude.
More than 100 international delegates are expected to attend the funeral with heightened security measures in place. World leaders, including US President Donald Trump and representatives from Italy, France, Germany, Britain, Ukraine, the European Union and Argentina, have confirmed their participation.
The President of Azerbaijan, Ilham Aliyev, met in Beijing with Song Hailang, chairman of the Board of China Energy Engineering Corporation Limited, also known as Energy China. Song Hailang proposed a new cooperation new cooperation ideas, including energy corridors, while President Aliyev stressed the strategic importance of the partnership. They also discussed creating an energy research centre and collaborating on water management. Energy China operates globally in renewable energy, hydrogen and power grids, with 256 branches in 147 countries and controlling half of China's renewable energy market. The company is also overseeing major projects in Azerbaijan, including a 1 gigawatt offshore wind farm in the Caspian Sea and solar energy investments in Fuzuli. The First Lady of Azerbaijan, Mehriban Aliyeva, her daughter Leyla Aliyeva and other family members visited the Great Hall of the People in Beijing. The Great Hall of the People, located at the western edge of Tiananmen Square in the heart of Beijing, serves as the venue for China's most important state events and ceremonies. These include congresses of the Communist Party of China, annual sessions of the National People's Congress, and official welcoming ceremonies for foreign heads of state. Afghanistan and Kazakhstan have finalized trade deals totaling $140 million after a series of negotiations and meetings during a 3-day visit by a Kazakh delegation to Kabul. Officials from both countries described the visit as a success. Tamim Bahis has more from Kabul.
In a significant boost to regional trade, Afghanistan and Kazakhstan have signed 20 memorandums of understanding worth over $140 million during the Kazakh-Afghan Business Forum and joint exhibition in Kabul. 3 MOUs were signed between chambers of commerce, while 17 focused on sectors like logistics and transportation. Afghanistan's acting Minister of Industry and Trade, Nuruddin Azizi, hailed the forum as a success and emphasized the creation of joint mechanism to address cross-border transport challenges. Azizi urged Kazakhstan to ease exports of key goods such as flour, oil and fertilizers to Afghanistan, and suggested the country could become a more affordable supplier of vehicles due to its proximity. He also highlighted rising Afghan exports to Kazakhstan, including minerals, fruits, cotton and carpets. He expressed hope for balanced trade and thanked Kazakhstan for its $500 million investment in Turgundi-Herat Railway, calling it a vital step towards stronger economic ties. This is Tamim Bahis in Kabul for A News.
A warning sign from Kazakhstan's parliament. The Caspian Sea has dropped to its lowest level in recorded history. Despite international agreements meant to protect it, little action has followed. Lawmakers are now urging immediate steps, from opening up oil contracts to launching talks with Russia over the Volga River. Fariza Kalimurzina has more from Almaty.
The Caspian Sea has dropped to a record low of 29.21 meters below sea level, its lowest point since 1977. Kazakhstan's first Deputy Minister of Water Resources, Bulat Bekniyaz, reported during a session of the Majlis, the lower house of Kazakhstan's parliament. Unlike past declines, today's drop is driven by climate change, reduced rainfall and a sharp fall in river inflow, especially from the Volga River, which supplies around 80% of the sea's water. Development along the coastline is compounding the issue, with Kazakhstan's already shallow section at greatest risk. In parliament, frustration is mounting over the lack of progress since the Tehran Convention was signed nearly 20 years ago. Despite existing agreements, no permanent office or expert group has been established to act on them. Lawmakers stressed that since the Volga flows entirely within Russia, it's excluded from international agreements, making cooperation with Moscow essential to halting the sea's decline. Meanwhile, Kazakh scientists warn the Caspian could fall to 33 meters below sea level by 2050 if current trends persist. Experts estimate nearly 280 cubic kilometers of water annually, mainly from the Volga, would be needed to stabilize it. As an initial move, Kazakhstan and Russia plan to form a joint expert task force to tackle the crisis. Fariza Kalimurzina in Almaty, Kazakhstan, A News.
Baku is at the center of the global space conversation as it hosts the Space Technology Conference 2025. Experts from around the world are gathering to explore the future of space innovation and sustainability. Our very own Anastasia Lavrina has more on this.
Today, April 24, Baku hosts the Space Technology Conference 2025, a major event in the space industry. Over the next 2 days, almost 400 delegates from 35 countries will come together to discuss key issues in space technology, innovation and international collaboration. The conference will cover a range of crucial topics, including Earth remote sensing, the role of satellite communications in Central Eurasia, and the growing importance of innovation and investment in the space sector. Another key focus will be how satellite technologies can support sustainable development, a critical concern as the world seeks eco-friendly solutions. One of the highlights of the conference is a special visit by StarVision, a leading Chinese space intelligence company. In major collaborative efforts, Azerbaijan-Cosmos and StarVision, alongside Ningbo University, are leveraging satellite-based AI tool to monitor climate-driven changes around the Caspian Sea. Apart from that, 2-day sessions at the conference will cover key topics like the expanding role of Central Eurasia in the global space economy, satellite communications for regional connectivity, and spectrum management. A major focus will also be on how Earth observation technologies are enabling smarter, more sustainable resource use. Overall, this year's conference promises to be a pivotal platform for exchanging ideas, building partnership, and advancing the future of space technology. With innovative developments and announcements expected over the next 2 days, the conference is set to influence the direction of the global space industry. Stay with A News as we will bring you updates from this exciting event in Baku.
Turkey and Syria stepping up efforts to strengthen ties through a major push in transport cooperation. In a significant visit, Turkey's Minister of Transport and Infrastructure, Abdulkadir Uraloğlu, travelled to Damascus to discuss a series of projects aimed at restoring railway links, enhancing road transit and improving air connectivity.
Turkey's Minister of Transport and Infrastructure Abdulkadir Uraloğlu visited Syria's capital Damascus for a series of high-level meetings to enhance transport cooperation between the two neighboring countries. The historic Hejaz railway station in Damascus became the backdrop for a renewed partnership between Turkey and Syria. Minister Abdulkadir Uraloğlu's visit marks a new chapter in regional transport cooperation. High on the agenda was the reconstruction of Syria's war-damaged railway network, with a special focus on the strategic corridor between Çoban Bey and Aleppo. The Turkish side emphasized its priority to restore this line to enable direct connectivity between Damascus and Turkey, eventually linking it to European networks. Both countries agreed to immediately begin technical work aimed at easing road transit and streamlining customs procedures at the border. Discussions also included revitalizing routes originally part of the historic Hejaz Railway and launching joint training programs and technical exchanges. Minister Uraloğlu highlighted that transportation is essential for national development, stressing that meaningful progress is impossible without strong communication and logistical links across a country. In a significant move, Turkey and Syria agreed to reactivate all existing border crossings and are planning a pilot project to establish a joint border gate under a unified transit system. Uraloğlu pointed out the urgency of the collaboration, noting Syria's ongoing stabilization efforts after recent political changes. While Turkey is prepared to support road infrastructure upgrades, the minister underscored that rail remains the top priority. On the aviation front, Uraloğlu stated that flights between the two countries are currently operating at full capacity. Additional flights are being scheduled, and Syrian Airlines has shown interest in resuming services to Turkey pending certain operational conditions.
A major international exhibition at one of Europe's most iconic landmarks has become a huge success story for Turkey. Culture and Tourism Minister Mehmet Nuri Ersoy says more than 6 million people have visited the Göbekli Tepe exhibition at the Colosseum in Rome since it opened in late October. The ancient site, often dubbed the world's oldest temple complex, is being promoted as a global cultural brand.
The exhibition, titled Göbekli Tepe, The Enigma of a Sacred Place, has drawn more than 6 million visitors since it opened at the Colosseum in Italy on the 24th of October. The final count is expected to reach approximately 6.4 million by the end of the run next week. Turkish Culture and Tourism Minister Mehmet Nuri Ersoy says that showcasing Göbekli Tepe in such a prominent venue has played a key role in boosting visibility for Turkey's cultural heritage. According to Ersoy, the Colosseum is one of the most visited tourist destinations in Europe, especially by travelers with a keen interest in history and culture. He says that it's a prime venue for a targeted branding effort, making the exhibition both strategically and symbolically significant. He also says the impact on positive tourism relations has contributed to a notable increase in visitors from Italy, a country he described as one of Turkey's vital source markets for tourism. The Göbekli Tepe exhibition is part of Turkey's broader strategy to position its archaeological and historical treasures as internationally recognized cultural assets. With millions drawn to the mystique of this Neolithic wonder, the message is clear: Turkey is ready to claim its place on the global cultural map.
That's the world news for the hour. Keep watching A News for more updates throughout the day.